Alright, CNT120, Chapter 5, we've moved on to Twisted Pair. Again, before we dig into Twisted Pair, remember, when I hear Ethernet, I should be thinking 10 meg. Fast Ethernet, I should be thinking 100 meg. Gigabit Ethernet, I should be thinking 1000 meg or gigabit. And 10 gig, either 10,000 meg or 10 gig. Okay, I should be thinking those things. All right, Twisted Pair. Twisted Pair was actually kind of an adaptation from our phone cabling. We used phone cabling long before we used Twisted Pair for data. We used phone for early, dial-up modem connections and so forth. So my phone cabling is a non-paired, non-twisted, 4-wire cable. And my phone cabling got terminated with the RJ11 connector here. And this, as we see here, there's four pins for 4 wires. That's what I see. As we started moving into sending data across that and increasing the bandwidths, the structure of the cable had to change. So then along came Twisted Pair cabling. So as I look at Twisted Pair cabling, what I see are a couple things. We see wires paired in here. We have the blue, orange, brown, and green pairs. They're color-coded and paired. There's 4 wire pairs. These are typically 24 gauge. Sometimes I see 26 gauge in some newer ones, but they're roughly around 24 gauge. That's what I see. There's my 4 wire pairs twisted together. If I look at the structure a little closer, here's the outside jacket for protection. There's my twisted pairs again. And if I strip a little bit of insulation off, I see the copper conductor in there. That's where the actual signal travels. If I'm dealing with some of the higher categories of cabling, I might start finding, actually as I deal with higher categories of cabling, I will start seeing shielding around the cable or the wire pairs. So there's my basic parts here, and as I deal with upper categories, I'll be seeing shielding around the wire pairs or the whole cable, if you will. Fast Ethernet, we typically had 1 wire pair send, 1 wire pair receive, orange and green, if you will. As we moved on to gigabit and higher bandwidths, I start seeing all wire pairs. 2 pairs sending, 2 pairs receiving, if you will. Wires in here are twisted to reduce the effects of outside interference, electromagnetic interference, and crosstalk. It's not shielding, but it's kind of like shielding. Because with these wires twisted together, typically I'll have, let's just use the blue pair here. This white blue might be send and the blue might be receive. So those 2 signals are going in opposite directions. When I twist them together, I'm making sure they're acting as a pair. And if I have outside interference affect them, it's going to affect both wires because they're twisted next to each other. And that interference ends up canceling each other out because the interference on this one is going this way, the interference on this one's going this way. They tend to cancel each other out. That's the idea behind those being twisted together. So as we went from phone and sending higher frequencies, higher bandwidths of data across our twisted pair cabling, I should say, across our cabling, they started twisting for this effect to try to cancel out interference from the outside, crosstalk as well as EMI interference. So, before we dig into the categories, we also need to remember that outside insulation, the outside jacket here, the outside insulation, outside jacket, it has different combinations of plastic, different types of plastic for that outside jacket. A lot of your patch cables are just PVC plastic. As that burns, it's going to produce toxic fumes. As we get into cabling installed in ceilings, hopefully remember back in like Chapter 2 when we talked infrastructure, this jacket out here needs to be plenum rated. Now it's not fireproof. It's just less flammable. It's fire resistant. So if it burns, it's going to produce very low levels of toxic fumes or non-toxic fumes in our building, and hopefully not spread that throughout the building and cause people on another floor to start choking because there's a fire, if you will. That's the idea behind your plenum rated cabling. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. I have some examples to show you. All right, so with that, we have categories of cabling. As cabling, as our networks progressed, the cabling needed to to progress to keep up with the bandwidth needs. So we have categories 3, 5, 5E, 6, 6A, 7, 7A, 7A, and 8. Now I have examples of these to show you so you can see what has progressed over time. Starting in the early days of network, we had category 3. This was essentially very, very low bandwidth, basically 10 meg if you will, or phone. So category 3 is basically this right here. If you look at your phone cabling in category 3, it's barely even twisted. It's paired, but it's barely even twisted. That was your category 3 cabling. That was suitable for like 10 meg, your Ethernet networks, if you will. As we wanted to start sending more data through per time across the cabling, the structure needed to change. I use the example of, if I'm going to drive a dirt back road on my car, I'm only going to go so fast before my car is going to slide off the road. If I want to go faster on that road, I might need to pave it. If I want to go faster, I might need to widen it, cut down some trees. If I want to go faster, I might need to go through and, shave down some bumps so I'm not going to get air. So as I want to go faster on a road, the structure needs to change to accommodate. The same applies to network cabling. As they wanted to start putting through 100 meg or gigabit signals, we're raising the frequency to do so. The structure of the cable needed to change. So category 5, I'm getting more significant twisting for cancellation. Category 5E, it's almost not noticeable, but the twist pitch is more controlled, and the quality of materials in there got better quality copper and so forth. And because of that, category 5E, as you see here, was able to handle gigabit speeds. Category 6 and 6A, we're now moving into again, changing the structure again, usually putting a plastic divider in the middle to keep the wire pairs separated, to reduce the amount of crosstalk, and typically adding in shielding to again reduce outside interference issues. So here would be just plain category 6 with the divider in the middle. As we move into like 6A, we have the divider plus we start getting shielding around the outside. And all these are structure changes to allow higher bandwidth, higher frequency signals to move through the cable to get more throughput, get more bandwidth, get more throughput. Category 7, again, we want to start moving more bandwidth through, 10 gig up to 100 gig for short distances, or 40 to 100 gig for, again, short distances. Increasing this the signal 600 megahertz, 1000 megahertz to be able to get more data through per time. You typically now run into shielding around the whole thing and then shielding around each individual pair. That's what you typically run into with category 7. One of the drawbacks of 7 was the need for special connectors. Here was a special Terra connector for category 7 and a special it was a GG45, almost like a special RJ45 for category 7. And that leads to some connectivity incompatibility issues, if you will. Category 8, this is kind of available for home networks, moving its way along, hopefully down the road. What we're seeing is short distances, a little bit longer than 7, but I'm still relatively short distances, roughly in the 30 meters, somewhere in the connecting closets category. But I'm able to now have connectors that are backwards compatible. So here's category 8, again, shielded pairs, shielded around the whole thing, back to what we're kind of used to in like the RJ45 connector realm. So as I like to show there, I'm going to zip back through these again real quick. As we went from low bandwidth and adding more bandwidth, we keep changing the structure to accommodate more bandwidth. There was your 6A, 7, 8. Okay, so to be able to get more bandwidth through per time, as we raise that frequency, we're changing the structure to accommodate. So those categories are important to denote what is this cable able to support. Unshielded twisted pair, shielded twisted pair, as you saw as we went through those, some of those start getting shielding. There is specifically shielded twisted pair cabling. And here's your structure again, your wire pairs, and then shielding around the pairs, and then shielding around the whole cable, then your jacket, outside jacket there as well. And here just shows you example between unshielded twisted pair and shielded twisted pair. Our twisted pair cabling, there's some pretty good advantages to it. It's relatively inexpensive. It's flexible. It's pretty easy to install. It's reasonable distance. 100 meters is pretty good for most buildings, and it can accommodate a number of different connection styles that you would need, and different topologies, if you will, in a network. Disadvantages: you don't have the great distance you have with coax and fiber. And it is not immune to EMI. It is resistant to, but not immune. Something like fiber optic is immune to EMI. Before we go further, let's remember the plenum thing. We mentioned this back in chapter 2, I'm pretty sure. Plenum is a space in a building where you're moving air through. Typically above your ceiling tiles, you're moving air through to circulate your building. So if I'm installing cable in that space, it needs to be plenum rated cabling. So here, I'm going to start with, in my work area where my computer is, that patch cable. That's not in a plenum space. That can be a general rated cable. Communications multipurpose, G for general. G for general. If I look at that last letter, that's usually my clue. So my general rated cable is stuff like my patch cable material here. This patch cable material is a general cable. When I see patch cable on the side, I know that's general cable. It's typically PVC insulation. I can't put that up on my ceilings, but I can use that for patch cables. I might be connecting my closets from floor to floor, and if I do, I might run up through here to go to this closet above or down below. That is a riser area. That riser area, I can be using riser rated cable. Riser rated cable is, the outside jacket is less toxic, so to speak, with your insulation, a different mixture of plastic. And again, if I look at the last letter, CMR for riser, that's my clue. And actually, here is a box of riser cable. It says it right there for you. And if I were to zoom in, this is off a different box. But if I zoom in, I see CMR labeled on the cable or the box, letting you know that that's riser rated cabling. And it's more fire resistant due to the coating of the outside jacket, if you will. Last but not least, anything installed above your ceiling, and it could even be below the floor if you're using below the floor for ventilation, but typically above your ceilings that is a plenum space, so I need plenum rated cabling. So I'm looking for cabling CMP, communications multipurpose, P for plenum, P for plenum. And here is actually a box of plenum rated cabling, and if I were to zoom in and look at the label on the jacket of the cabling, I'd see CMP for plenum. This is a special fire retardant mixture that is used for the outside jacket, and it is more expensive. You might actually pay double the price for this box of cabling than you did with the patch cable. It can be best part of twice the price. Okay. And then out here is my twisted pair connections. There's our RJ45. This is what we use for our twisted pair connections. Actually, I'm going to come back in the next one and talk about the terminations so we don't run out of time.